Hello, everybody. I'm Brett Allen, President of the American Society of Landscape Architects San Diego chapter. I'd like to welcome you to this important discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion this afternoon in our practice. It's not an easy conversation to have, but it is a necessary one. The call for racial equality sweeping the nation has left us all reflecting on what more we can do to advocate for a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive society. Given current events, it is even more crucial that we break the silence and learn how to take positive steps for creating diverse, equitable, and inclusive environments. This is a call to action. Our profession needs to reflect the diversity of our communities, promote equity in design, and be inclusive to all. I'd like to introduce Rachel Boer, ASLA of the Landscape Architecture Foundation. Rachel is LAF's Director of Operations, where she directed the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Survey, as well as ongoing discussions on inclusion for LAF. Rachel earned her master's in landscape architecture from California State Polytechnic University, Pomona. Rachel will begin our program with an overview of LAF's 2019 survey findings and the key takeaways, and then moderate the panelists and the discussion. We have assembled an esteemed panel for this Think and Drink. Davi de la Cruz, ASLA, is an urban planner and landscape designer and a founding board member and administrator with the Urban Studio in Los Angeles, California. Davi is a first-generation student in higher education, received a Master of Landscape Architecture from the University of Washington, and was selected as LAF's 2017 National Olmsted Scholar and recipient of the $25,000 graduate prize by LAF. Born and raised in South Central Los Angeles, Davi, along with colleagues, launched the Urban Studio in 2019 to help train and support high school-aged youth from communities of color who are interested in careers in design. We will hear from Davi as to the importance of developing the pipeline of diversity in all aspects of our profession. Kenny Okibo, ASLA, is an emerging professional currently working as a landscape architectural intern with RDG Planning and Design in Omaha, Nebraska. As he pursues licensure, Kenny also serves on numerous industry panels, including the American Society of Landscape Architects Government Affairs Committee and their Climate Action Committee, and Landscape Architecture Magazine's Editorial Advisory Committee. Kenny considers designing for the public realm an awesome responsibility and values the lessons being shared by his peers in the profession. He even imagines new mediums through which innovative voices in landscape architecture can be amplified. Kenny and his colleague, Molly Hansen, began a program for advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion at RDG. Molly Hansen is a conservation and community outreach specialist with RDG Planning and Design in Des Moines, Iowa. She is sixth-generation Iowan and a graduate of the University of Northern Iowa with a degree in earth science and a minor in geology. Her career has been focused on conservation, and she learned very early that conservation, more than anything, is about people. She is co-chair of the newly formed Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and focuses on unique engagement strategies that drive projects ranging from park master plans to trail recreation amenities to college campus wellness centers and beyond. We will hear from Kenny and Molly about establishing and implementing a bottoms-up approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion for their firm. Mark Rios, FASLA, is founder and principal at Rios in Los Angeles, California. Formerly trained in both architecture and landscape architecture, Mark has seen those two disciplines as inseparable. He founded Rios Associates in 1985 with a singular vision: to imagine, design, and build complete environments. Mark has created an environment where colleagues were free to draw from any number of design influences, and the firm was renamed Rios in 2020 to acknowledge its focus on collaboration across disciplines, experiences, and walks of life. Mark received his Bachelor of Science in Architecture from USC and earned his Master of Architecture and Master of Landscape Architecture degrees simultaneously from Harvard University's Graduate School in Design. We will hear from Mark as to the importance of principal leadership in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Before we begin our program, we would like to thank the ASLA San Diego chapter sponsors whose generosity make these events possible and free to members. Please support Ripro House, TB Pennick & Sons, as well as Modern Builders Supply to show our thanks for their funding. A special thank you to the Landscape Architecture Foundation, whose research and findings on diversity, equity, and inclusion have prompted this discussion today. Founded over 50 years ago, the Landscape Architecture Foundation, or LAF, has been the nexus of inquiry and innovation for the landscape architecture profession. Today, the mission to support preservation, improvement, enhancement of the environment has never been more resonant. LAF invests in research, scholarships, and leadership initiatives to increase our collective capacity and achieve sustainability and support the next generation of design leaders. You can find this research report on the LAF website,
LAfoundation.org.
LAfoundation.org. Let us also remember that we are all coming to you from occupied territories of the Native people. We should take a moment to honor the nations and tribes who respect and preserve these lands which we now reside. So what is the Think and Drink? It's a virtual happy hour where we can gather together and break the silence about a very important topic: diversity, equity, inclusion in our landscape architectural practices. We will be respectful of each other and learn from the experiences. We'll be able to ask questions of the panelists using the Zoom chat function at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to ask questions during and throughout the event, and we will try to get to as many as possible during the Q&A session. This session and the chats are being recorded for posting on the ASLA San Diego website. Please mute your microphone and grab your favorite libation to join the Think and Drink. Rachel, could you please kick us off with the findings of LAF's diversity study?
I can do that. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you to the San Diego chapter ASLA. When they first asked for us to do this panel, it was much earlier in the year, pre-COVID, and I was going to come out to San Diego. I am from California and was very much looking forward to meeting with you all, but I'm happy that we can do this virtually, and it's been able to bring other people into the conversation, so I'm excited for that. So again, I am Rachel Boer with the Landscape Architecture Foundation. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the lands of the Piscataway people. We are a nonprofit, as Brett said, located in Washington, D.C., and our mission is to support the preservation, improvement, enhancement of the environment, and how we reach our mission is by investing in landscape architects. So we're very people-focused. And you may have heard of some of our programs. We're the largest provider of scholarships within the profession. Our Landscape Performance Series is an award-winning program that proves the benefits of good sustainable design. Our LAF Fellowship for Innovation and Leadership. And if you haven't heard, we've launched the Designing the Green New Deal Super Studio, and registration is still open if you want to take part in that initiative. But what I'm actually here to talk to you about today is our diversity, equity, and inclusion work, which started in 2015 with the President's Council. So the President's Council is made up of the organizations that you see here, and they come together on an annual basis to look at things that they can do for the profession to move it forward, to get an update on what each other are working on, and to be able to collaborate. And in 2015, we all signed on to a diversity statement called Mirroring the Nation, Landscape Architecture in the Future. This statement set ambitious targets for increasing diversity in the profession and committed each organization to recruit and retain underrepresented students, help mentor graduates into professional life, and foster an inclusive and welcoming practice environment. Upon signing on to this, we went back to our board. Our board is a very involved board. You can ask them all. They help us do everything that we do. We have a committee for everything and a task force for everything, and we developed a task force. And these people that you see here, Kofi Boone out of NC State, Kona Gray of EDSA, Diane Jones-Allen out of UT Austin, Ernie Wong out of Site Design in Chicago, myself, Ellen Deming, Deb Gunther, Kendra Hyson, and Sarah Brainbridge make up the current task force, and we work on strategies to increase equity and inclusion within the profession. Following on 2015, you may have heard of our Summit on Landscape Architecture and the Future, which we did in 2016 to really set a path forward for landscape architecture. And we put out what we call the New Landscape Declaration. It is a set of values and a bold vision of where we would like to see the profession go, and it really focuses on ideas of climate change, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, environmental justice. And so these values really overlay everything that we do and lead them into our programs and our projects, and including this diversity, equity, inclusion work that we do. So we have a three-pronged strategy that might be useful for other people to think about in terms of how they set up their own. First was really focusing on ourselves, right? We would need to kind of do some housekeeping within our own programs and operations before we get to working on other areas. And so looking at who was on our board, who were we reaching in our programs, who were we communicating about, who are we communicating with, who's in our network, who are we bringing into the fold. We looked at policies and procedures within our own operations and really enhanced those. And all of this work is work that is ongoing, right? It's always stuff that you're going to add to and improve onto and keep up that commitment. The second one was to develop strategies that recognize people that are already here. A lot of our conversations, which we'll come back to in a minute, really focus on the pipeline, right? Everybody always wants to do more K through 12 and increase the pipeline, which is very important, but it doesn't recognize the people that are already here. So who are we supporting? Who are we mentoring? Who are we promoting? Who is making it through the career path? Who are we ensuring is here and recognized? And so we've developed multiple strategies that help to do this. Some of them are interview series where we promote people and other people get to know them. Some is promoting the work of firms that are already that are putting practices and policies in place to help others learn how to do that. And then the third is really what I'm going to talk about today, which is developing tools and resources and programs, new tools and resource programs to support equity and inclusion. So two of the big ones that I'm going to talk about are initiatives that we launched in 2019 and are ongoing to today. The first is our DEI survey, which Brett, I just lost your photo there, which Brett had mentioned earlier. And then the other one is a Board of Directors challenge that I just briefly want to go over. So in 2019, we recognized that we had been working within this task force based off of everybody's experiences and having conversations with others and developing programs. But we got to a point where it was like, well, we should really check in with the wider profession and see where they're thinking about these things, right? In the profession, we don't have a baseline survey that kind of gets information about the diversity and the equity and inclusion or what people are thinking about it. And so we decided that we would launch one. We actually launched two surveys. One is focused on individuals and one is focused on firms. So we wanted to know the individual person working within the profession, what their feelings on this was. How were they experiencing the profession and where did they think the profession needed to go? And then number two was firms, because we really do believe that firms need to become more equitable and inclusive, but we didn't know what they needed to do that. And we didn't know whether or not they thought the same thing. So we did a survey to find that out. And just briefly with the survey, so for the individuals, we had about 551 people respond to it. About 87% agreed that diversity, equity, and inclusion is important, but that 13% is a long way to go. We definitely need to get to 100%. It needs to be a value throughout the profession. White respondents reported having a longer length of time within the profession. They were also more likely to be licensed, which we've been talking to Clarb about. And older, straight, white, abled men have most trust in their employees. So all of these areas kind of show us where we can work on and where we can improve. Women perceive their workplaces to be less experienced in DEI, and there seemed to be some confusion on what like an actual commitment to equity and inclusion is versus an equal opportunity statement. So these all represented opportunities for us to develop new programs and resources to help people. On the firm side, 100% of firms thought that DEI is important, but again, most of them felt that the main issue was actually the educational pipeline, and that recruitment will solve the problem. Recruitment will not solve the problem. You need to become equitable and inclusive outside of that. We need to be able to do both, right? You're not going to have a bunch of people come into the profession and then realize that it's not equitable and inclusive, that it's not there to support them, because you're going to lose them. So we need to be able to do both. Many firms thought that they were already diverse. And then about 76, the interesting one, 76% of firms are reporting that more and more often they are being asked about the diversity of their project teams. So you're going to start seeing clients who really want their project teams to look like the communities that they're working in. And so how do we become that? That's important to be able to have people that understand the communities that they're going into. And then some firms were interested in policies and procedures, which we're putting together to share with them. So overall, just some key big takeaways. So there's overwhelming value of DEI, but definitely note of additional resources that are needed. This is an opportunity for not only us, but other organizations to provide them to the profession to help move this forward. The discipline as a whole really needs to work to build trust with people. So Black people, Indigenous people, other people of color, LGBTQ, and people with disabilities, right? Really showing up for them, recognizing them, supporting them, promoting them, and building areas of trust where people want to work within our profession. And then one finding that we had is that some people will feel comfortable sharing their whole identity within the workplace, but when they go working with other clients, or maybe it's in a different country, they're not as comfortable. And so firms really need to be understanding of that and figure out ways to open up a dialogue to make that experience more comfortable and support their employees. And again, back to the educational pipeline, I won't go over that again because I feel like I've got it already. I've drilled it in with you guys. We need to do pipeline and we need to be equitable and inclusive at the same time. These things are both important and they can both be done. So tools require actions. A survey is really cool. It gave us a lot of baseline data, but it really doesn't do anything unless we act on it. And so what we're doing right now is back in our task force, really going through the data. We provided a lot of opportunities for people to leave us comments and feedback on each of the questions. And so we're going through that to really identify areas that we can provide resources and support. And then the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about was power and privilege and a DEI board challenge that we did. So last year at our annual board of directors meeting, we decided to hold a 2-day session on power and privilege with our board. Some people kind of think about bias training. You can kind of think about it that way, except it just went much further than that. We set it up so that way it gave a baseline understanding, but then went into deeper conversations on meaning, why it's important to us, why it's important to the profession, why it's important to others, and then ended that with a long discussion on how we turn this into action. LAF is very action-oriented. We want to be able to act on the things that we say. We want to be able to fulfill the things that we believe in, and so we're always looking for action. So what we did was we had each of our board members that are represented by these firms and organizations here make a solid commitment to increasing equity and inclusion in their profession, or within their organization, sorry. And so the idea was that they could make an actual commitment that they can work on, then we can check in on it and make a difference. If we can get all the firms in the profession to commit to being equitable and inclusive, we could make a real difference within the profession. And so we hope by our actions within our board that it will inspire others to do that as well. I'm happy to report that I have regular check-ins with all of them, and they have all made significant progress on this. And because they've made a commitment does not mean that they didn't already have programs in place. Many of them did, but we can always be doing more. There's always more to be done. So with that, I will thank you all for having me today. This is my email address here. You can find it really quickly on our website too. If you have any questions about what we talked about, if you have any resources that you need or things that you want to talk about, I am always open to an email. Send me an email, we can get on the call and chat about this, and we can talk about moving forward. So thank you. And with that, I'd like to introduce David de la Cruz with the Urban Studio.
Thank you so much, Rachel. So first of all, super excited to be on this call, just kind of sharing a little bit about the work that I'm doing. Definitely wanted to give thanks to the folks organizing the call. So thanks so much to the ASLA San Diego team. Thanks so much for bringing me in, and thanks so much as well to the Landscape Architecture Foundation for really not only supporting my personal development in the profession, but also supporting the work of the Urban Studio. I think we can't tell the story about the Urban Studio without really acknowledging the role of the Landscape Architecture Foundation. So the Landscape Architecture Foundation really supported the kind of the birth of this organization. It's a fairly young organization. And so 3 cohort members from about 2 years ago basically were a part of the founding group for the Urban Studio. And so I'm really excited to kind of just share some of this work. So my name is David de la Cruz. I'm calling in from the original homelands of the Tongva people. Really excited to just kind of dive into some of the things that we're going to be focusing on as an organization in the next couple of months, and just things that you all can keep an eye out for. So the Urban Studio has this vision where we really see a world where all people have the means to create healthy, vibrant, and just communities. It's a very kind of solid vision that we really think that is achievable, but it takes a lot of work. So here we go. The team is made up of 6 board members at this time. It's a working board. So we have Kendra Heisen, our board president. She, as you may have seen, she's really active with the Landscape Architecture Foundation and specifically in the DEI task force, among other things. We also have Andrew Sargent, our vice president, our expert in technology and AR and VR, and also a digital artist. We have myself, landscape architect in training, urban planner, fine artist. We have Maisie Hughes as well, certified arborist, nonprofit leader, who's just an incredible force guiding the organization in a really visionary way. We also have Jen Lowe, who was previously at the Landscape Architecture Foundation, that has so much experience in the field and also brings in a range of expertise from a really unique program, in integrative design. And she also is based out of Washington, D.C. So one of the other things I wanted to highlight is Jelani Bird is one of our youth board members for the organization. For us, it's really important to find ways to encourage this youth leadership, and really creating a seat for youth to sit on is super important. So as an organization, we really are values driven. Our values are authentic and meaningful engagement. They are intergenerational leadership and mentorship. They are looking at design as a form of liberation, design as liberation. We really look to highlight and find ways to co-design and co-create within communities of color. And lastly, we really want to highlight that there are experts in communities, and these experts can bring their lived experiences to really shape design and change-making processes in their communities. So when we start off with this value of authentic and meaningful engagement, we really commit ourselves to nurturing a different relationship to engagement, so that those who are most affected by design decisions are really seen as key members in the process and key members of the design team. So we're really looking to promote the local leadership that exists in communities and bring them in to specific projects so that they can really help us shape what makes sense for their neighborhoods. In addition, this value of intergenerational leadership and mentorship uh, happens in multiple ways. As I mentioned earlier, we have a youth board member seat, but in addition to that, we did host a Cut Fill Unconference just a few months back. Um, this was an opportunity for multiple people at different levels in the profession to share kind of some of their expertise and some of their just knowledge of being in the profession. There was a range of conversations that really just helped build relationships across a range of people. And so we commit ourselves to this idea of nurturing that leadership and mentorship across all stages of professional development and all age groups. So when we think about something like design as liberation, it's a pretty kind of tough task to think through, but we really look at leveraging interdisciplinary art and design to replace the broken and ineffective design processes that shape our current world. Specifically, I want to speak to some of the work that I was a part of in Los Angeles. Although we're a bi-coastal organization, uh, we have membership here in LA and we have membership for folks in the East Coast, specifically Washington, D.C. So in Studio South Central, over the spring of last year, I hosted a kind of a small cohort of students that kind of explored this idea of just being engaged with arts and relating it to their neighborhood. So one of the things that we took on is this idea of telling a story about our neighborhood, telling a poem about our neighborhood. And so there was this collective poem that came out of this cohort. Although this wasn't the only thing that they were doing, they weren't just writing, they were just engaged in a number of activities that really helped them think through their neighborhood. Um, I think for me, one of the impactful things about this poem is that they were really able to kind of find a voice for themselves, to think about the things that they experience in their neighborhood and really put it into writing, to really just get the ideas of being critical of where they're living into their heads. Our other value that's really important is looking at co-design and co-creation within communities of color. Not only do our youth programs look to kind of encourage youth leadership, we did have a program in DC where we found Jelani and his kind of expertise. He was a really important leader in this youth cohort of students that basically looked to kind of garner their leadership and train them and build their capacity to think through design problems and really figure out a way to kind of identify how to approach stormwater solutions in their neighborhood. Lastly, what does it mean to elevate the experts of lived experience? For us, elevating key community experts means that we're bringing them into the design process, we're paying them for their time, and really looking to compensate their contributions in a way that's really institutionalized into any proposal that we take on. So these people, these community members, oftentimes they're our neighbors, they're people that we build relationships with over a long period of time. And we really think that they are experts of that neighborhood, of that city, and they can become, or they can provide information about this neighborhood that often designers won't be able to have access to. So really thinking through these values, this shapes our mission to really advance design thinking for equitable and sustainable urbanism. And so as designers of color, as a board made up of uh, designers of color, we're working in communities of color to really achieve something really simple, to really green cities for all people. And for us, I think we always look to find partnerships that can help us elevate these core values and really drive this mission home to make a difference and to make an impact at several stages, from the K through 12, specifically high school students, to really nurturing youth leadership through college, through their path into the profession. And so we really just find ways to promote leadership at multiple stages of people's lives. So with that, I want to pass this on to Kenny to talk a little more about some of the different ways that they're really taking on from a bottom-up approach, this issue of supporting young professionals.
Oh, thank you for that. Beautiful. Before Molly and I start, we thought that we'd begin with our organization's mantra, create meaning together. As we talk about how from the bottom, talking to everyone else who's kind of above us, being able to play into the ideals that everyone buys into as an organization was really strong. So.
Hi, I'm Molly Hanson. I'm a Conservation and Community Outreach Specialist with RDG Planning and Design. I'm located out of our office here in Des Moines, Iowa.
Yep. My name is Kenny Okibo. I'm part of the Landscape Architecture Studio as well, landscape architect intern for the time being, and I'm out of our Omaha, Nebraska office. So Molly and I wanted to start off by talking about how long we've been with the firm. So we've been with RDG for 3 years, and when we say 3 years, that's not like an accumulated 3 years. That's not 3 years each. That is total. Like we've both put in a massive 3 years. This is like a quick graphic that the organization has on the website of how long people have been with the firm for an average of 10.6 years, which if you do the math means that there is about 1,850 years of experience, and Molly and I are contributing 3 to that. So like as we're bringing this conversation to the group, we were very cognizant of how we are presenting information and making sure that we don't come off as the new kids off the block trying to change everything. We wanted to make sure that this was an inclusive discussion and that everybody that's in this image felt a part of it.
So we are really just getting started in our work. And to illustrate that point, we wanted to walk you through our timeline of 2020 so far. To get an idea of where we've been, and then we can talk a little bit about where we're going. Some of these conversations, at least for me personally, started with our beginning of year check-in with our bosses, and I decided to make a vision board. And one of the things on there was talking about DEI a little bit more in there. And fortunately for me, there were other folks who had this in mind, Kenny being one of them. We started having some internal planning meetings in March to discuss what this would look like and how it might take form in terms of our, we have some active committees and how does it fit into the structure. A great resource for us was talking with Rachel with the Landscape Architecture Foundation to sort of think about what's already out there in terms of resources that we could bring to our firm from a trusted source in the industry. And as all this was happening, we were grieving the loss of George Floyd. And we put this in here to acknowledge that there were a lot of other things going on and things in play that really, I guess, motivated us to continue this work. We reached out and interviewed folks from other firms, Sasaki being one of them, to get an idea of what they've been working on, how it's working, how it's not working. The great thing about this topic is there's so much work being done out there, and making sure that we are not working smarter, not harder, I guess. What tools are out there that we can use, and how do we personalize them to the folks that we're directly impacting. And so we actually got the chance to present to all of our staff, which for us is 2 big offices, one in Des Moines and Omaha, and then satellite offices all around the country. And that was the first time that we were able to specifically introduce people to the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and lay the groundwork to ask to form a formal working committee.
Now you can hear me. Talking a little bit about the presentation, which Molly just introduced. It was a huge opportunity for us to introduce the basics of what the eventual conversation would be, an intro to DEI as we framed it. We wanted to get three things across. We really had three main goals, as you can see on the screen. Number one, introduce basic vocabulary. Number two, present resources which people could learn from and self-educate, and then things that they could bring back to other members of the team and have conversations about. And then thirdly, we wanted to keep it light and personable. That was really the big goal that Molly and I wanted to go into this with. We wanted to make sure that nobody felt as if they were being called out, but we wanted to make it feel as though anybody that was part of this is a part of the solution and is a part of advancing the firm. So we went about it in the form of movies and pop culture references. The intro slide, we grabbed some of the text from our existing company manual and made sure that people understood that we're not coming out of this from nowhere. People before us have done good work establishing a ground or a foundation, and we're just taking that and advancing it as with any project that we take on. We went through the next image, right next to that first one, is talking about how we explained the connotation of these words that we hear all the time, we use all the time, but then or the denotation of these terms, so the dictionary definition, but then we also took a step back and explained the connotation of how we see them being used in our workplaces. And then we used the exercise of looking at movies and seeing how inclusive popular films are, using the Bechdel test, and asked the entire firm to play in this little poll game of, do you think this passes the Bechdel test? Feel free to ask us about that later on. And it was great to have people engage and see how inclusive things that we accept as in pop culture actually are or aren't. And then lastly, Mal and I had a tongue-in-cheek video that we made based on the Star Wars Cantina scene, where we talked about different ways that you can see diversity and inclusivity, not only in film, but also in practice. So from March moving forward, so we introduced the concepts during that first employee meeting, our ITEE meeting. We were able to begin planning the structure of this committee, which we got approval for. And then from there, we had our first meeting. And from our first meeting, we've hit the ground running and forming initiatives for the group, taking on different tasks that the group members brought on board. And one of the most important things to note about the DEI committee within the organization is that every member of the committee is almost self-appointed, in the sense that they came forward and they said, we want to be a part of this. And that was huge. One of the biggest things that came out from after the presentation, as we mentioned earlier, we wanted to keep it light, keep it very personable. And the best criticism that came out of it was, we keep hearing that we should be having tough conversations. Didn't feel like a tough conversation. And Molly and I, who are in different cities, had like a virtual high five of, that's perfect, good, you're ready for step 2.
So we really need to acknowledge a lot of people have helped us on this journey already so far. And one of the common things that we've learned from these folks, and this is just a short list, it's not exhaustive, but is that everyone feels like they're just getting started. And so for people who are just getting started, that was very comforting on the one hand, but also so many people are further down the line than us. But the constant and affirmative feedback that we got from people was that we know we have a long way to go. We know we have that this is a constant process, that it's not, there's not an end line here. We have to continue to work, and we have to continue to expand our own education so that we can share that and encourage others to do the same. And you know, I'm checking in with our equity coordinator for the city regularly, asking her, you know, are we pacing this okay? Are we going too fast? Are we going too slow? Working with local nonprofits to better understand how their experiences and working with different companies around the community have gone, and kind of what what the attitude around the city is for different companies, working with folks from tons of different perspectives, both are, landscape architecture and engineering firms like ourselves, but also folks who are doing completely different work and better understanding their experience so that we can get a more well-rounded vision of what we're doing. And so it takes a village is true in so many terms, but the way that we formed our committee and the structure that we put our committee is only to expand that. So it's basically like a healthy board structure. We're going to have people cycling through. We're going to have term limits and rotations so that there's always new people and there's always new ideas, but that there's a participatory pool that is always welcome to anyone who gets interested and wants to be involved. And that was really important in putting together our structure.
And one of the things that I think Molly and I are most proud of is the purpose statement which our group has come out with. And if you don't mind me reading it to you very quickly, RDG's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee was initiated by individuals from across the firm's disciplines, tenure, ownership levels, leadership, and experience. The purpose of the committee is to develop and implement resources, strategies, and best practices with regard to all intersections of human diversity. We also serve as a sounding board for non-committee members to provide suggestions and help address challenges. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are strengths. As we evolve our internal policies and procedures to value our ethos, we can better serve our clients, communities, and the greater good. The ultimate goal of the DEI Committee is to enact transformational change to foster a culture of empathy and understanding. We all have the power to positively impact the world around us. We believe it's our responsibility to be agents of change in creating environments that are just, equitable, and diverse by always taking one step forward. In closing, one last thing about this statement. Every individual that you see on the image above, every member of this committee contributed to this statement. If we could highlight words by the individual above, it would be a tapestry or a rainbow of every person embedding themselves into this. And I think that's why Molly and I are so proud of it. With that, we look forward to questions at the end where we're grateful for the opportunity to speak to you. And we graciously hand it off to Mark Rios, who will give the perspective of what senior leadership and principals are able to contribute to this conversation of diversity, equity, and inclusivity. Thank you.
Great. So fantastic to hear what everybody's endeavors are and how you've been sort of working on all these issues. I just want to start by thanking very much Brent and Kathy and Tracy of the San Diego chapter for putting this together, because being transparent, talking about these issues is really important for us to all be able to share with each other what we're doing and what we're thinking about and what our successes and failures are with this, so that we as a community of landscape architects can really work to make change. And I really want to commend the Landscape Architecture Foundation and Rachel for the work they do at trying to learn for all of us and accumulate information through their surveys and the missions of their boards that, again, collectively as landscape architects, we can understand what we're all doing and share information. I'm going to keep it kind of brief. I want to talk about sort of 4 different things today. But most importantly, I want to start by saying that I'm the spokesman for a really wonderful, diverse, smart group of people in our firm, Rios, who are really taking the lead on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this panel was put together, I think, from a very carefully curated point of view. People early in their career, midpoint, and I suppose I'm representing the more senior members of our profession. And the most important thing that I can do to help for diversity, equity, and inclusion is to let others lead. And I think that being able to have faith and release and let others lead and give room and space to lead is the first step that we can all do about having diversity and diverse leadership and inclusion. The first thing I think we've talked about doing, and our group of leaders in our office, is to really say all of us need to be able to articulate a mission. We have to articulate what we believe in. And so I would really encourage all firms to start having those discussions and be able to, end of the day, write down and articulate, just that we've heard from others, what you believe in and what your mission is. Let's go to the next image. Kathy, thank you for putting all this together for me, helping me with it. Great, let's go to the next one there. This is just a quick timeline. I think that we've all really been made acutely aware of the inequity in our culture and our systems through these shootings and the deaths that we've had this past spring. And although all of us, I think, have been working on these issues for a long time, as far as diversity in our hiring and looking at how our projects are helping community building, that we've all had a call to action. And I think that's helped us all look at ourselves, be more self-critical, and ask others so that we can collectively get better. And so this is just a quick timeline of what we've been doing in our firm. And it's really been about developing people that can take leadership on these issues and help us to really think about in a fundamental way how we can contribute and organize ourselves. Next image. This is our core group of colleagues. Several of them are on the call here today, have really been spending time brainstorming and really thinking about how we can develop a comprehensive program to address diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I really want to share the format that they've come up with, because I think it's a good practice and a good model that others may look at. And I'm hoping in sharing what we're doing, we're going to learn from what everyone else is doing. And so that's why I think that the Landscape Architecture Foundation here is really playing an important role to help all of us as landscape architects share what each other is doing. So basically, we've had a group of people that have really taken leadership on this, and they've developed a whole program that deals with a leadership committee, and then various specific topic subcommittees to really take ideas and help realize them. We can't have everyone in the office basically be a part of sort of the leadership group. And so we've developed a whole system of people being able to volunteer to a variety of committees and teams to really allow more contribution and to empower more people. Next image. So this is just a quick diagram of how we've begun this organizational process. And I think other firms will have lots of other ways of doing it, but my colleagues have come up with basically a council, and the council has all sorts of different skill sets and levels of commitment, and a few of the more senior and other leaders in the office are acting as advisors to them. But our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council is really taking the leadership for all of us in the office on these issues. Next image. And they've basically developed a program with 3 core committees: a committee about external mentorship, a committee about business operation and project development, and a committee about community building. And they've basically spread themselves based on their interest to each be involved in leading some of those committees. We also have some ongoing initiatives that deal with basically recruitment and internal mentorship, and also sort of our own personal growth and evolution. And so this is sort of a roadmap that we're using in the office. Again, it's based on lots and lots of conversations and contributions. And this is really a test plan. So we'll see, we'll report back to you how it all goes. Next image. These three committees that are really form the basis of our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals are really dealing with three different types of directions. One, external mentorship. How can we as landscape architects engage with other communities to help them understand landscape architecture, promote careers in landscape architecture, mentor them, help them in many sort of different methodologies as far as local schools, job fairs, so on and so forth. But it's really a whole group that really looks at ways of doing mentorship outside the office. Another core committee really is organized around our business and how we run our business. We really are making a commitment to having a social impact statement for every single project in the office, so that every project we can have a specific goal and articulate it, how it can contribute to these aspirations. We're looking at how we can engage our clients in this, how we can collaborate with different collaborators and consultants and other nonprofits, but how can we, from a core business point of view, really look at an engagement that really promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I would like to say, we're also looking at how can that group help contribute to what projects we take. And is there an evaluation process that we go through as we're sort of going through marketing, and how those projects that we're pursuing may relate to these goals? And finally, the third committee is really about building community. How do we build the community around us? We're located in the Crenshaw neighborhood of Los Angeles. We've made some beginning relationships with a lot of the local educational schools around us. How can we do things to help build the community which we're lucky to be a part of? Next image. And finally, we have some initiatives we think that are really important. The first one is, how do we recruit professionals from Black and Brown communities that can really contribute to become architects, landscape architects, planners, and designers? How can we be more inclusive? How can we help them know more about the profession? How can we help them know more about us? And how can we learn from them? And so this is really about outward recruitment for other kinds of colleagues and partners and interns. And then secondly, how do we sort of evolve ourselves on our own personal and collective growth? And that deals with all sorts of inclusive training. What's our onboarding process? We're looking at having some third-party audits done of our programs so we can really understand if we're doing what we want to do, and how to sort of review and meter those kinds of programs. But how do we evolve ourselves to be more inclusive as professionals? Next image. These are just some of the current programs we have going on, and you can see some of the different committees and sort of what they're working on. But it's a start, and we're really trying to be able to be clear about what we're involved in, what we're doing, how we're contributing, and how it's going. So we can really check ourselves to say, are we being effective? Are we making any kind of difference? Next image. And finally, I think one of the questions we all really need to talk about is, how do we pay for that? How do we pay for our work to be more diverse, have more equity, and be more inclusive? And it's a tough thing, because all the things we've all talked about as far as community building and mentorship potentially can cost money. And so this is just a graphic that shows that I think all landscape architects deal with all the time, that most of our income that we get comes in and it goes out to all of us. It goes out to salaries, our payroll taxes, all the insurances we have, that there's another really big portion that goes to rent, insurance, all the ongoing business expenses. And there's maybe a quarter of our expenses or of our income that may go to bonuses and other things that sort of make us all operate. And when you really look at how we as landscape architects run our businesses, there's really only about 8 to 10% of all of our revenues that we can look at and say, how can we do something with this amount of money? And so what we're trying to do is to look at all the things that we spend money on. And you can see all those list items in sort of the brighter colors. And how do we see those through a lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And how can we make sure that the money we spend on employee meals or the events that we go to or the unbilled time that we spend on projects, how can all of those better our mission of diversity, equity, inclusion? And I don't think it's that any of us are going to be able to say, okay, we're going to give $500,000 or whatever it is to these kinds of efforts, but how can we spend the money that we already have to spend and we do spend to really pursue these goals? And so our plan, and I'm not sure how we're all going to do it, but it's to have a voice in all of those expenditures that help us look through the DEI lens. And so that our community of leaders have some way that they can participate in those kinds of decisions so we can make sure that the money we spend actually supports our goals. So that's what we're trying to do. We're really just starting it. And I'd like to turn it back to Rachel, who is going to sort of lead, I think, some questions. And so we can really have an open discussion. And again, our goal is to learn from each other through these kinds of chats.
Yes, thank you, Mark and Molly and Kenny and Davi for all of your amazing work and efforts in this area. It's so interesting how all of the speakers today are really kind of focusing on the multiple layers and levels and even organization types that it really takes to push this forward, particularly in a profession like ours. And so thank you for being here. And there are a couple questions in the chat, but I'm going to leave a little bit of time for a couple other people to add in some questions while I sneak in my own. So you're all being warned now. And I think I will start with Javi, if you don't mind. So a couple of things that really stood out to me in your presentation, and I think Kenny as well, I saw this in the chat, was design as liberation. And then really the emphasis on our neighborhood. So taking the students out to our neighborhood and looking at our neighborhood. And so I wonder if you can kind of elaborate a little bit more on what exactly design as liberation is and what's the importance of our neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that question, Rachel. I think the way that we always want to contextualize the work that we do is we want to set the tone and recognize that there's like a legacy of disinvestment in a lot of the communities that we want to work in. And so these are not only policy decisions that impact people, but these are like literally like a lack of investment in infrastructure, lack of investment in something like trees in a neighborhood. And so really looking at how to nurture that critical thinking in youth to look at what they see in their neighborhood and figure out what it is that they can do, like individually or like as a group, participating in something like a summer or spring program, to really tackle the issues of needing more trees, of like the reality of air quality in the neighborhood. So when I'm thinking about something like design as a liberation, I'm really thinking about how we can tackle physical or built environment issues in a neighborhood and really like focus on like learning about the range of benefits from um, like shaping spaces and dealing with stormwater to really make that like a platform to learn about our neighborhoods and like bring that to students so that they can really connect to it and find relevance in it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the work that I have seen come out of the Urban Studio really focuses on showing youth that that it is their neighborhood and that they have the power to design it, or potentially have the power to design it and create what they want with it. And it's just such a powerful thing. I've seen a couple presentations out of it, and applaud you all on the excellent work that you all are doing.
Thank you.
So Kenny and Molly, Molly, I think you had mentioned about it being long work. So for anybody on here, there's no quick solution to equity and inclusion and solving these long issues that are due to systemic racism that are built within our society. And so it takes long work. If it could have been solved already, it would have been already. And I don't think that people always realize that, right? We kind of want the quick answer and how do we solve it right now? But you had mentioned that that realizing that you have to keep going. And so I guess for somebody who might be starting out these initiatives at their place, how do you think is best way to keep up that momentum, or how do you keep that going? Do you guys have any thoughts on how to do that?
Yeah, I'll start, and Kenny, please jump in. I think a couple of thoughts come to mind. One is we always talk about the dual track that we're on. One being, long strategy, vision, goals, really, really trying to be, and I'm not a strategic brain person, so this is the lesson in patience and learning. But that's one track where we're really trying to be thoughtful and think all those things out ahead of time. But the other is being a little reactionary. When we see a situation in our daily lives, in our work, in our firm, a personal story that we hear from a colleague, how can we think about that process and react to it? And so we're really trying to find the balance of those two parallel tracks so that we can be present in the day-to-day and react and respond to things and support our colleagues with the things that we're learning, but also really put the effort into being into the long game, as you say. And I think that's it's a little bit of an ebb and flow, and that's where our committee, I want to thank all of them so much, because they come from, we're a multidisciplinary firm. We have architects, engineers, landscape architects, artists, lighting designers. And fortunately for us, that means we all use different parts of our brains differently. And so we have strategic thinkers, and we have, people who want data and analytics. And then we have, the hype girl over here who's just like excited about it and trying to be really, enthusiastic and motivating and bringing everybody in with our harmony. We're very strength finders focused. And Kenny and I are super relationship forward in our strength finders. And so for us to be able to start this and bring people in and hopefully help them feel comfortable even going on this journey with us, I think that's one of the really important pieces. And that's why I think we approached our original ITE presentation the way that we did, dressing in robes and pretending to be Star Wars Jedi, was because we wanted people to have a positive memory of the presentation and the interaction with us, so that the next time we came to them with another presentation or an information share, they themselves would be more open to having that.
Yeah, it seems like you guys, oh, sorry.
Oh no, I wanted just to back up everything that Molly had said. I probably quote The West Wing too frequently, but it's one of my favorite shows. If you haven't watched it, please watch it. And one of the episodes, the quote was, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with many. We have the challenge of needing to go far fast. And I think that speaks to what Molly was saying about just the work that we're all trying to do and the different minds that we've brought onto the team. Or rather, we didn't bring anyone onto the team, the different people that were like, hey, this is the thing that we're doing, great, I'm doing it too. It's like, oh, good, very good. I think that singular quote really brings home the point that Molly was making, that it's a little paradoxical, the work that we're trying to do, because we're trying to enact immediate change that is going to be long lasting, but you can't make anything substantial. You can't make any substantial change instantaneously. So fighting that paradox and doing it strategically, while also, to restate something that Molly already said, we are not strategic thinkers at all. We are all, most of our top 10 strengths in the study are all relationship building. So that's where we thrive. That's why we want to do what we want to do. But it's great to have individuals that are really data driven on the team as well.
Yeah, and I think that that's so awesome that you had all of these people that wanted to come together and help you, because it does take leveraging all of the strengths. These are big things to work on. So, Mark, I actually have a couple questions I'm interested, but I will give you just one for now. But I want to come, if we have time at the end, I want to come back to the how you pay for it, because I talk to firms a lot, and the way that everything is billed on hours and stuff like that is really kind of one of the areas that people haven't quite figured out how to get there yet. But at the beginning, you started with this, you had mentioned success and failures. And oftentimes when people are starting out on this work, there is a fear of failure. There's a fear of doing the wrong thing or doing the wrong initiative or launching it in this way. And I wonder if there are those things for your firm, or maybe you launched something that was maybe seen more as a success or more as a failure, and how you moved past that. Oh, I mean,
it's one of the great things for all of us as designers, that we learn through failure in a really empowering way. And so we're not afraid to fail. That's how we learn and we get better. And so we're putting all these things out, and I'm just so proud of my colleagues for setting out this roadmap. And if we get 60% of them out there and done, that's huge. And so we're all trying to take action. We need to do it. We have to forget failure and assume we're going to have some, and be self-critical enough to learn from it and just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, as long as you keep going and apologize when you need to, and do things with respect and the way in which, and include as many people as you can, it's just so imperative to move forward. So thank you for adding that. I wanted to get to a couple questions that are in my chat. Let me get there real quick. So one is for Kenny and Molly, and they applaud the work that you're doing, and they are curious as how many offices does RDG have that were able to contribute to the effort?
Yeah, for sure. I'll snag this one. And Molly, if I miss anything, please do the needful. So RDG has 3 major offices. So we are in Omaha and Des Moines, and then there's another office that's in St. Louis as well. And then there are individuals that are speckled around the country. And from those 3 offices, we have representation from all of them. Like we were stating, and also in our mission statement, I think it does a good job of expressing who's a part of this initiative, and it's really a collective of everybody, in the sense that we have engineers, interior designers, principals, and people that have been in for less than 5 years, that being me and Molly. Yeah, we've got people from all of our offices, and then from all the way through the ownership levels and ownership when it comes to the combo of stockholders. We have project managers, and we have project support. Yeah, Molly, what am I missing?
Well, and I think I guess the other part of that question, maybe the other thing that we tried to do is, we were lucky that we got that early platform to speak to everyone. So when we say ITE, I literally don't remember what that acronym stands for, but it means we get to talk to everyone in all the offices, and they're required to tune in. And so that was like a gift, because you don't always get that opportunity. And then we never should say this, but I'm going to anyway. The pandemic and COVID and going virtual and getting more comfortable with virtual is something that has helped us a lot in terms of this sort of egalitarian, all the offices and everyone can participate. And so when we put out the call to be a part of this committee, everyone had the same opportunity to do so. Kenny and I literally just had the realization the other day that we've never met in person, which we didn't know because we're best friends now. And so we're like, if we can do that, just by Zoom and meetings and planning and being on this committee, like that's the opportunity. Those are the relationships that we can actually build doing this. And so we lucked out getting the platform to speak to everyone. And then ideally, if those happen quarterly, we would get like just a 5-minute reminder to everyone that like, hey, we're here, we're doing this. If you're interested now, you can jump in at any time. And hopefully that's the reminder that we keep going of like, that's how we're going to recruit people to the effort.
Cool. Yeah, I think the going virtual has been interesting, at least on our side too. It's been able to expand our reach and who we can include in our initiatives. And so that's been really interesting as well. So do the speakers have ideas on good ways to foster getting young students representing diverse cultures introduced to and interested in our professions?
I'm going to say, I think there's just lots and lots of ways to do it. And there is no wrong way. And so part of it is just being really active in our local communities and opening our doors and sort of through exposure. I think trying to really be active in other places of learning and to, again, contribute and just expose people to what we do is really important. I think being really good civic leaders so that there's more exposure of landscape architecture on a broader basis to people is really important. So I don't think there's anything wrong that we can do. It's just really being deliberate and trying to find ways of exposing more people to landscape architecture and particularly to expose communities that haven't had the opportunity to be exposed before.
Debbie?
Yeah, I mean, for me, there were a few like pivotal moments for me that like just thrusted me into this idea of thinking about the built environment. I was a part of like a high school internship program that like put me into an office in the city department and just like showed me what it means to manage a grant and like what the impacts are and how to like oversee projects. As an intern, I was just kind of working closely with the person doing the work. And so offering internships or figuring out where those internships are to really pay youth to kind of get exposed to this is like one of the things I always encourage. And for me also being a part of a local community organization that was like figuring out how to give youth the kind of the knowledge and the experience about talking about their neighborhood and like pointing to the injustices and like uh, just like pointing to solutions, not only kind of pointing to the issues, I think is just a good way to bring youth along so that they can really connect to um, like a tangible way of like understanding a profession. So if they're looking at or looking at a land use map or something like that, like who deals with issues of land use and like what does it mean to live next to an industrial neighborhood and what the impacts are there.
Street. Oh shoot, it's not working.
Hey Bianca.
Bianca, I think you're on. I think you took yourself off mute. Right, thank you.
Yeah, so not only encouraging internships and like hiring local youth, but also figuring out how to partner with local community organizations that have kind of a youth component that are already a kind of a cohort of students that are like really interested in kind of figuring out their next steps. I think the Urban Studio really learned and it really wants to highlight that like importance of like really tapping into local high school leadership and figuring out how to nurture their leadership as they uh, like make choices about potential career paths, and then guide them once they're at a like a local university or a local community college.
Great, thank you. Molly or Kenny, do you have anything to add? Or
I think that Devi and Mark put it really well, but just adding my 2 cents to it, I think that the profession and the industry doesn't exist until it exists. So like presence is sometimes enough. So it was really cool to see that Rios is involved with ACE mentorship. I just got the email stating that like our session in Nebraska is starting up again. So I think that's a way that landscape architects can when I say passively, I mean like you're making a significant impact, but it's not taking a huge amount of resources. You're physically present for a few hours out of the week, sometimes out of the month, and that's a great way to get in front of students that are making decisions about their next few years before they go into college. And when I was living in Fargo, we had a project where we were able to, it was probably the most engaged I was able to be with a community, and it was with an elementary school, and we went through the process of educating them about like, here is this detention basin, and what do you think are the animals that live in here, and what habitat would they like, and how would that animal, whether it be a grasshopper or a fox, how would they like to live in this space, and giving them that opportunity to think through how a being or how a life form lives in a space and what's comfortable for them, and having them use that imaginative mind and having them create their environment. And I think this goes to Devi, the work that you're doing in the urban studio. Getting kids to think about how they can create the physical realm around them is huge, and I don't think that it's a huge undertaking if you just get in front of them. So I think presence is the most we can do.
yeah. I think I want to echo the ACE mentorship and even supporting the work of the Urban Studio, who's doing an excellent job. ACE mentorship always needs more landscape architects, otherwise it'll just be architects and engineers, and then we won't get the students into our profession. There's also a couple other, ASLA has really great resources if you're interested in getting into classrooms. We put out a K-12 guide that kind of tells you how to get into a classroom, and we launch it every year trying to get people to go out and do what we call a K-12 day. We're not doing it this year because it's COVID, but maybe there's a virtual opportunity. Maybe those teachers, or even a parent, maybe a parent just needs you to like tell their kid about design for an hour so they can just have a break, just kind of sharing it with the young people. I know most people that I ask about when they found out about landscape architecture, it's usually late in life. It's usually after a first, degree or something like that, and that they get into it. And I think it's important to start talking about it. So I am looking at the clock, and apparently there's something big happening in 10 minutes from now that we should all be aware of. And so as long as everybody's registered to vote, we're counting down the days. Okay, good. I would like to, if you don't mind, Kathy, you can stop me right now from this, but I would like to give each of the panelists a final question to answer, the same question for all of you. So thinking about the work that you are doing and thinking about the work ahead, I would love to know what you see as the biggest opportunity in it and what you see as the biggest challenge in it, in your particular work.
All right, I'll jump in. And Molly, if I steal your answer, I'm sorry, but you could have gone first. Just kidding. So I think that the biggest opportunity that we have is definitely creating an environment that is not only hospitable but welcoming to the team that Molly and I want to work on, and then also that seeks after and puts priority towards the work that Molly and I want to do. It can sound a little selfish, but I think that it's a necessity for us. And then I think the biggest challenge is, and this is something that we knew getting into it, but finding a way to, I don't think amicably is the right word, but palatably disseminate the information that we need to and have people receive it in an understanding way is something that we're always cognizant of. And yeah, I think that made sense.
No, I totally agree. Our offices operate a little differently, but we're also part of a whole unit. And so there's the unique challenges at each location, and then there's kind of as a whole. But I think our biggest challenge is, no, I'm going to go the other way first. I think our biggest opportunity, and I just had my 1-year anniversary in August, so I'm still very new. Thank you. I've worked for a real company for a year. So I'm saying that. I've just, being the relationship person, I've got to know folks really well, and you hear their stories. And so I think there's a lot of stories here. And making sure that those are heard and valued. You know, we always talk about the pipeline, and we always talk about recruiting and retaining. And I want to make this place better for everyone who's already here. And there's a ton of work to do. And so that I see that as an opportunity. Like, everyone who works at RDG deserves the best, but deserves better, and deserves, you know, to feel just like welcome and embraced and accepted for who they are all the time. So that's our opportunity, is to just create this amazing place for them. And then I think the challenges are, I just had a quarterly review, and I was reminded to remember that my constructive criticism was to remember the balance and the pace, and understanding that we have to go slow. And my favorite saying that I have just repeated over and over again is that we need to meet people where they are and help them take one step forward. And it's hard, but it's necessary.
I wanted to jump in with that idea of meeting people where they are. I think the big opportunity for the urban studio and the way we're approaching projects is really figuring out how to do that, how to like think about engagement and think about projects that are being implemented in communities that really are cognizant of meeting people where they are. With everything happening right now, really thinking through small scale engagement that is really tapping into local leaders that can shape the process and really tailor kind of what we're listening to, who we're listening to, I think is super important. I think the opportunity to like make meetings innovative and make meetings kind of outdoors in a way that's just different, and not the traditional kind of indoor meetings, large town halls that are often not as engaging. I think the opportunity is really just to kind of think creatively and think outside the box, to listen to folks and to listen to community members, and really see what their priorities and their needs are in a neighborhood. And I think the constraint is like obviously the digital divide that exists in a lot of low-income communities and working class communities, but I think figuring out how to be present, like Kenny was saying, figuring out a way in and just like a way to build relationships is super important. So.
Great, thank you. And Mark? Oh, I thought we lost him. Oh, there he is.
I'm just going to address opportunities. And as landscape architects, we are all powerful people. And we don't necessarily think of ourselves as powerful people, but we are. And we have to look at every single one of our opportunities, whether it's our clients, the communities we work with, the organizations we belong to, and how can we be a little braver and wear all this more presently? How can we put our values on our sleeves and get all the communities we're involved in, all the governments we're involved in, all the clients we're involved in, more aware and more active? How do we commission them to help us? And so I just want everybody to think of themselves as really being powerful agents. And we have incredible connections and abilities, and we have to lead. And we have to be articulate and show it and lead.
I think I'm going to follow that with, I think some of the greatest opportunities are in the challenges. I think sometimes where we have not met our potential is actually where all of that opportunity lies. And so I would like to thank you all for being part of that and helping to push all of this forward in your individual ways, which really comes together as a collective action to push the profession forward, because there is lots of opportunity for potential for the profession and places that it can go and where it can reach. And so thank you for your work that you're doing.
All right. Well, as we conclude, I'd like to thank you all, our panelists who have inspired us and challenged us to think about our practice and our colleagues with an open mind. Really appreciate you taking time out of your day today to do this. We realize it's a volunteer thing and you're all are busy. Davi De La Cruz of Urban Studio, Kenny Okibo and Molly Hansen of RDG, and Mark Rios of Rios. Thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank Rachel so much, Rachel Gore and the Landscape Architecture Foundation, as well as our chapter sponsors, TV Panic, Modern Builder Supply, and Repro House. Thank you all who participated in this Think and Drink. Things like this will make a difference. And I have to say, this has been the smoothest, I think, Zoom presentation I've been on. So you all did a great job. Thank you all so much. I think they're getting easier, and things are starting to absorb more with these Zoom things, whereas at first I felt like they were bossing over, but I really appreciate it. There is a recording of this going to be posted on our ASLA San Diego website, www.asla-san-diego.org. So if anybody has anything else, maybe stick it in the chat or feel free to email us. But thank you again to all our panelists and Rachel for your time tonight. And happy viewing of the next big event that I think everyone's off to watch.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody, so much. Take care.
Bye, guys. Thank you all for joining.